the 13th lecture on church history. In our last lecture, we learned about Martin Luther and John Calvin in the Reformation. Today, we will begin with the revival of the Roman Catholic Church and the Jesuits. Number 8. The revival of the Roman Catholic Church and the Jesuits. The Jesuits initiated the Roman Catholic Church's counter-reformation in opposition to the Protestant Reformation. This movement aimed to remove corruption from the Roman Catholic Church, reform rules, and continue the doctrinal position. Number 1. The origin of the Jesuits. 1. Francisco Jimenez. Francisco Jimenez was born in 1436 in Spain and died in 1517. He studied in Rome and followed a strict life of faith as a member of the Franciscan order. In 1495, he became Bishop of Toledo, and he became the head of the Church of Spain. He cleaned up the church, established a university, and did his best to return to Aquinas theology. Number 2. Campeggio. In 1524, Campeggio movement in southern Germany. Number 3. Contarini and Carafa. These two focused their reform movement on Italy. In 1555, Carafa became Pope Paul IV, and he did his best to renew morality. Number 2. The founder of the Jesuits. Ignatius Loyola was the founder of the Jesuits. He was born to a Spanish noble in 1491. He was educated as a knight, and he cultivated leadership. In 1521, he suffered a serious injury while fighting in a war. After being hospitalized, he read a book, a saint, and then became devoted. He studied at the University of Alcalá and the University of Salamanca in Spain, where he studied philosophy and theology. When he was 37 years old, he entered the University of Paris and studied there. He and his 6 companions formed a small organization They vowed to protect Christians who were suffering in the Palestine region and to be faithful to the Roman Catholic Church. Number 3, we will study the Jesuits in more detail. The Jesuits, a monastic order formed in the Roman Catholic Church, lived regular lives, evangelized heretics, and converted pagans. The Jesuit order began with Ignatius and his 6 companions. The Pope approved of the Jesuit order. They began with 60 members. The Jesuits had a code of absolute obedience, and members received preliminary training for 2 years. As students, they took classes for 5 years, and for another 5 years, they served as professor and studied more. Then they studied theology for 4 years. They were trained for a total of 16 years. They made the 3 vows of obedience, poverty, and chastity. Study how they expanded their power. Through confession, they heard people's confessions. They eventually learned of political secrets, which were used as an opportunity for growth. They also grew because of education. They ran universities and developed the ability to lead high society. They also did foreign missions. Francis Xavier, a Spanish person, did mission work in India, Sri Lanka, and Japan. Matteo Ricci did mission work in China, Brazil, and Europe. These efforts of the Jesuits had an impact on Protestantism. It was originally under the control of Protestantism, but the Roman Catholic Church took control of the region. Also, an internal awakening happened in the Roman Catholic Church. Spain and Portugal were able to go out to foreign places. They evangelized Africa and Asia. They also played a big role in introducing Western culture to the East. Number 9, the Council of Trent. Number 1, the objective of the Council of Trent. A. Pope Paul III convened the council. He did this because Emperor Karl V of Germany petitioned for it. The Council of Trent lasted for 18 years, from 1545 to 1563. During this period, 5 different popes were in power. It was the 19th World Council. B. The subject of the council. The emperor wanted to improve the church and come to a compromise with Protestantism. However, the Pope, in order to prevent chaos with Protestantism, argued that they should establish doctrine. Number 2, the time period of the council. The first session, 1545 to 1549. The second session, 1551 to 15. The third session, 1562 to 1563. Number 3, resolutions. The Bible and church tradition have the same authority. Intercessory prayer between the dead and the living is valid. The veneration of saints and indulgences are acknowledged. The Latin translation of the Bible, the Vulgate, has the greatest authority. There are 7 sacraments. People are justified by faith and by good works. Transubstantiation is acknowledged. Number 4, the results of the Council of Trent. Many Catholic leaders the council. At the council, Protestants lost the right to speak. The Roman Catholic Church's doctrine was reconfirmed. The council served to correct the rules of the Roman Catholic Church. It set the stage for reforming the Roman Catholic Church and for evangelism. Pope Pius IV promulgated the results of the council in 1564. Number 10. The Reformation in Scandinavia. Scandinavia was far, distance-wise, from Rome, and Roman Catholicism had a weak influence there. For this reason, the Scandinavian region was quickest to Reformation. Number 1. The Reformation in Sweden. 1. When Gustav Vasa was seeking asylum in Germany, he encountered Martin Luther. Later, after he became king, he continued to keep contact with Luther. He ascended the throne on June 6, 1523. Number 2. Olaf Peterson, Lars Peterson, and Lars Anderson were key figures. These people translated the New Testament to the Swedish language. Number 3. In 1527, the king convened the National and the Lutherans the right to worship and gave them freedom. Number 2. The Reformation in Denmark. 1. King Christian II adopted a government that was in favor of Lutheranism. 2. Hans Tausen was a pastor of the Palace of Denmark. In 1530, he and his companions established the Copenhagen Confession, and church government took after the Lutheran way. Number 3. In Norway, the king, with his power, carried out the Reformation. Number 4. In Iceland, Gizur Einarsson became bishop of the Church. In 1554, Protestantism took control of this island. Number 11. The Reformation in the Netherlands. The Netherlands of the time was larger in area than the Netherlands of today. It was a wide region including today's Netherlands and Belgium. This wide land was divided into states ruled by princes until the Count of Bourgogne married and merged these states. Number 1. The colonial era. The Count of Bourgogne died when fighting France, and most of the land became French. Afterwards, Germany's Emperor Karl V took power, and the land became German territory. Karl V severely oppressed Protestantism, but Martin Luther and John Calvin's ideas spread widely throughout all of the Netherlands. After that, because the land once again became Spanish territory, Philip II persecuted them. Number 2. The War of Independence. Number 1. Wilhelm. He is called the Prince of Orange. he grew up in the Catholic faith. When he was 11 years old, he inherited the family line of Orange, and when Emperor Karl V of Germany captured the region, Wilhelm won the favor of the emperor. Spain's Philip II persecuted the people by sending the Duke of Alva and killing 18,000 people in the Bloody Council. This became the cause of the War of Independence. Number 2. At around 1568, Wilhelm cried for the freedom of faith. He gathered fishermen and sailors and started the War of Independence. In 1574, the Catholics laid siege to the city of. At this time, Wilhelm broke the dikes, filled them with sea water, and was victorious. They declared independence in 1581. Wilhelm became president and started a reform movement centered on universities. In 1584, Wilhelm was assassinated by an assassin sent by Philip II of Spain. However, he was succeeded by his friend and his son. In 1648, the Peace of Westphalia was signed. This gave them complete freedom of religion. Number 3. The results of the revolution in Netherlands. The University of Leiden, the University of Franeker, the University of Groningen, and the University of Utrecht were established. The establishment of these universities played a major role in reform. Calvinism was prevalent in the Netherlands, and because of religious freedom, it became the center of the reform movement. Number 12. The Reformation in France. There were forces in France that were against reform. The crown was opposed to the Reformation. The Parliament was against it as well. Finally, the law of Sorbonne was opposed to it. Number 2. The Reformers. 1. Margaret. Margaret is the sister of Francis I. She wasn't completely a Protestant, but she sympathized with the ideas of reform and worked to protect them. In 1527, she married the King of Royaume de Navarre, which is a small nation within French territory. She was called the Queen of Navarre. She also provided her palace as a place of refuge for reformers. Number 2, John Calvin. John Calvin didn't in France, but he provided support for France in many ways. In 1555, in Paris, France's first Protestant church was founded. During 8 years after 1555, 49 churches were planted. Most of the church leaders were educated at Calvin's school in Geneva. Up until 1567, 120 pastors were sent to French territory. Number 3, the incident of the Huguenots. 1. The beginning of the incident of the Huguenots. Catharina, who served regent, needed to conspire with the Protestants in order to increase her power. On March 1st, 1562, the Guise brothers, who were leaders of the Catholics who were opposed to Catharina, in an attempt to break her down, sent their guards and had them attack the Huguenots who were worshipping in Vassy. Number 2, the timeline of events. At first, it was simply a religious quarrel in France, but it turned into a religious war. The incident of the Huguenots became a very long-term event. 1. The First War. The war lasted for the leader of the Huguenots was Condé. He was supported by the reformers of England and Germany. The leaders of the Catholics were the Guise brothers and General Montmorency and Saint Andre. The leaders of both sides became prisoners, and all of them died in battle. The Edict of Amboise ended the war in March 1563. Let us take a look at the details of the Edict of and law. The Catholic Church was permitted to worship in Roman Catholic cathedrals in Paris and other cities. The Huguenot nobles to practice their faith, and they were granted permission to find worship places in their cities and palaces. Number 2, the Second War. The Huguenots, seeing Cardinal Lorraine rise to power in the court, tried to remove him. This led to war. In November 1569, the Huguenots and Catholics, both tired of war, agreed to an armistice. Number 3, the Third War. Catherine de Medicis said, "The Huguenots are responsible for the Second War." Doing so, she began to banish Huguenot pastors. Not much. The two sides, both tired, signed the Peace of Saint-Germain. Number 3, the results of the incident. Because of the Peace of Saint-Germain, the Huguenots were granted the freedom to worship outside of Paris and were given equal rights. However, the terms of the peace made them give up 4 of their cities. Number 4, the St. Bartholomew's Day Massacre. The Huguenot Wars did not end as France's internal civil war, but it became a war in all of Europe between the Protestants and Catholics. The mother of the king of the Catholics, Catherine Medicis, married her daughter off to King Philip of Spain. The Protestants then married Elizabeth's sister, Margaret de Valois, to Henry of Navarre. St. Bartholomew's Day was held on August 24th, 1572. People gathered in Paris to celebrate the marriage, but 70,000 people were massacred there. In the country, a countless number of Huguenots were killed. Number 5, the Edict of Nantes. The death of the Huguenots brought about the Edict of Nantes. On April 3rd, 1598, Henry IV announced the relationship between the state and Protestantism. The Edict of Nantes gave Protestants the freedom of conscience. It gave Protestants the freedom of worship. They were given the right to hold government offices. Protestants were given the same rights as Roman Catholics. Also, they were guaranteed safety. Number 13, the Reformation in Scotland. The background. Number 1, the background of the Reformation. Because of the strong spirit of independence, Scotland hated being under the rule of England. Scotland had a very close relation with France. Scotland, which had been influenced by Calvin, saw the Reformation actively take place. Number 2, the establishment of universities. Before universities were established in Scotland, people studied abroad at the University of Oxford. These students were influenced by the thoughts of John Wycliffe, and thus possessed the ideas of the Reformation. The students who studied in England brought the books of Martin Luther when they returned to Scotland. They not only were influenced by Martin Luther, but they also were influenced by John Calvin. Thus, the Reformers. In 1411, the University of St. Andrews was founded. In 1451, the University of Glasgow was established. In 1494, the University of Aberdeen was founded. Number 3, the religious reformers. Number 1, Patrick Hamilton. Patrick Hamilton was the pioneer of the Reformation in Scotland. Inspired by Martin Luther, he studied in Germany and returned to Scotland, shouting and preaching ideas of reform. Hamilton was martyred on February 27th, 1528. Number 2, George Wishart. George Wishart is John Knox, who was martyred on March 1st, 1546, while giving a reform-minded sermon. Number 3, John Knox. John Knox, the son of a great landlord, studied at the University of St. Andrews. He was affiliated with the Roman Catholic Church until 1530. He was George Wishart's disciple. Knox served time in prison, but when he was released in 1549, he became a pastor in England. In 1554, he met Calvin. He pastored various churches and did all he could do for the Reform movement. John Knox's logical ideas as Calvin. As someone who was quick and organized, Knox was a key figure who helped in successfully completing the Reformation in Scotland. He made Scotland the birthplace of the Presbyterian Church. Today's Presbyterian Church started with the Presbyterian Church of Scotland. This concludes the 13th lecture on church history. Thank you.